Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Woodland Park Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, December 12th. Roll call, please.
Don DeZellem,
Present.
Jared Newcomb,
Here.
Ken Kennedy,
I'm here.
Larry Larson,
Here.
Don Hoyne,
Here.
Cole Middleton. Oops, Okay.
Absent.
Lee Brown is also absent, and then Chair Hartsfield.
Here, thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Tonight on the agenda, we have a public hearing. In that case is to consider a flood hazard development permit requested by Andrew Pankoff of Atlas Technology Consultants for environmental remediation cleanup of a fuel spill on land owned by the city of Woodland Park. Staff have a presentation?
We do. Thank you, Chair. Perfect. So as you stated, Chair, this permit application was for a flood hazard development permit. So here we go. So because we don't process many of these permits, we wanted to do a quick overview of the code that outlines the flood hazard development permits. So Title 20 outlines these permits and states that a flood hazard development permit needs to be obtained before construction begins with any special flood hazard area. It is important to call out the definition of development, which in this section 20 states that it is any man-made change to improved or unimproved areas. And lastly, the last bullet here on this slide is section 20.05.020, and it is applicable with this permit and states that the land disturbing activities for all structures, fill, and the storage of materials may result in unprotected soils that would highly be susceptible to erosion during times of flooding if not protected. So long story short, by code, this is the reason why we're here hearing this flood hazard development permit. So just a little background for the commissioners here. So on May 16th of 2023, an incident occurred when a fuel tank transporting red dye diesel overturned. The truck overturned within Gold Hill South, immediately northwest of 717 Gold Hill Place, where the Sherwin-Williams is located, as you guys can see here on the slide. Approximately 2,100 gallons of diesel was released into an asphalt surface and flowed to a storm drain. Diesel fuel entered the storm drain system, flowing through the series of above and below ground drainage culverts. From the initial point of release, the diesel traveled approximately 1 mile downstream, following the stormwater drainage system towards Fountain Creek. Due to the placement of berms, sandbags, and polyurethane sheeting, the release was contained at the main downstream area, which was west of where AutoZone is located and south of the Trail Ridge Apartments. The area of Fountain Creek, where the main collection area of the fuel spill is located, is owned by the city of Woodland Park. This slide is an aerial photo of the main downstream collection area. The contractor placed hydrophobic boom across Fountain Creek in multiple spots and utilized absorbent pads to control surface, sheen, and floating diesel impacts. Free-phase diesel was removed along with surface water from the main collection area as of May 17th of 2023, leaving diesel impacted sediments. It is believed by the applicant that a majority of the diesel released was collected from the initial main downstream point, which is this area located here on the slide, by skimming followed by dewatering. So due to the emergency situation associated with the fuel spill, the remediation work has already been performed. The flood hazard development permit is being presented to Planning Commission here tonight in order to meet all requirements outlined by FEMA and city code. Currently, there are no other excavation activities planned for the subject property for further remediation. Moving forward, the focus of the applicant will be ongoing monitoring of the sediments to evaluate their conditions. Since the fuel spill testing has been performed by the applicant and the results are in compliance with industry standards, thus not needing additional remediation at this time. On the next slide, you will see two photos, site photos that we took just late last month. So for reference, the site plan is on the right-hand side of your screen. And the first photo you'll see is where the number 1 is located. The second photo is going to be where I stood to take the second photo.
And which way were you looking when you took your photos?
We'll
TJ?
get to that on the next slide. The first picture here, number 1 on the last slide, this photo was taken looking north at the subject property, and the second photo is looking south of the subject property. The application was referred to everyone here on the slide, and staff received no public comments. Attached to the staff report was the full comment letter from the city's on-call engineer. As you all saw, the engineer that reviewed the application stated that the application could be approved based on what was submitted and the work that was performed. As previously mentioned, section 20 is applicable to this application, and it does comply with code sections listed here on the slide. The applicant outlined the remediation construction within the narrative and states that as a result of the nature of the project to provide excavation and backfill of contaminated soils and no drainage or floodplain modifications that would differ from post-construction conditions from the existing conditions, no negative impact to the floodplain or drainage channel in the final construction conditions. The applicant also submitted a no-rise certification that was stamped by a licensed professional engineer. The applicable general and specific standards listed in Title 20 of the Municipal Code are addressed, and the attached or the letter that the applicant attached within the application was from the applicant. The proposal is in compliance with the applicable standards here on the slide, and the erosion control plans were also accepted. And lastly, staff's recommendation on this permit is that Planning Commission approve the flood hazard development permit requested by Andrew Panop of Atlas Technical Consultants for environmental remediation cleanup of a fuel spill on land that is owned by the city of Woodland Park, legally described as Lot 7, Woodland Park Plaza, which is located along Fountain Creek, west of 1017 A-B east of US Highway 24 and southeast of the intersection of Laura Lane and Rosemont Road in the planned unit development zone, subject to the following condition. Prior to any future land disturbing activities located within the floodplain, a flood hazard development permit must be issued by the city of Woodland Park. And that concludes my presentation. We have Mr. Panop here and with us tonight, if you guys have any questions for him. And we also have Scott, sorry, Scott, on your last name, Caller online.
Taylor. Close enough.
I believe he's with EnviroCert, which is the contractor that did the work at the site. So,
Okay, want to take a moment. I didn't get into the procedure we'll be following tonight. We had the staff presentation. We'll have the opportunity to ask staff any questions on what they presented. Then we'll ask the applicants or the representative to come up and explain the project or make any comment they might have. And we can ask questions of that. And then we'll go to the public hearing session, and anybody in the audience or online who wish to make comments or questions can be addressed at that point. We'll give the applicant a opportunity to address those comments and concerns with more discussion from council or commission, and then probably take it to a vote and come up with a decision. So at this point, we would invite the applicant to come forward and make any comment you wish to provide to us.
Yeah, sure.
Just go to the
just
podium,
right here.
please.
Yeah, sorry, Andrew.
State your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Pankop. I'm with Atlas Technical Consultants, representing the project as the applicant tonight. I just want to thank you all for your time and for your review of the project. Just as CJ had noted, this is kind of a non-typical scenario in which the work that was performed on site was in emergency response to the fuel spill. So retroactively, we're submitting this application for the flood hazard permit approval, ultimately for the work performed and the restoration activities that are still yet to be completed in this area. So as noted on the work to be, the work that was completed, the soils were excavated, the hazardous material was removed with subsequent testing to confirm that there were no remaining diesel range organics in the soils within this containment area. And through that testing was performed by GEI and continues to be tested along that roughly 1 mile trail that the diesel traveled from the shopping center down to this containment area. But ultimately, the work that's still yet to be performed is just kind of that final restoration activities. And those activities are outlined in our erosion control plans that were submitted in conjunction to the flood hazard permit. And really what that entails is permanent seeding, stabilization type activities. And then as part of some of the work that was performed as part of that emergency response, some of the stones and riprap within the channel were moved to allow the excavation. Those will just need to be replaced and put back as existing conditions had indicated. I think there's also maybe a section of fence that just needs to be closed up where that was used as access the channel. In my no-rise report, I had mentioned that through these excavation and backfill activities, essentially the channel was disturbed and replaced to match existing conditions. We weren't going in and changing side slopes or channel depths or the channel floodway or anything in that regard. So our engineering and professional opinion is that based on these changes to the site, there have been no detrimental changes to the floodplain or the floodway or any of the adjacent properties. And that's all been outlined in our no-rise report that's provided to you guys for review. Scott, I don't know if you have anything to add, if that's proper sequence of events.
No, I think really with what the discussion is tonight and the permit we're talking about, I think you really covered all of that.
Okay.
So to summarize, there was an accident, chemicals were spilled. It's been cleaned up through the mile-long process.
Mhm.
And the discharge point to the soil is where the contamination collected. You've taken out that soil, brought in new fill, whatever's required, and basically it's gonna be as it was before.
Yes. Putting it simply, that's exactly right. There is still work as part of other permits, like up in the shopping center, to do some additional cleanup and just restorative actions up there. But specific to this, yes, the containment area has been decontaminated is the wrong word to say, but it has been excavated, backfilled, and further testing has concluded that the DRO levels within the soil are well below industry standards. So we, based on hazardous materials, fuel spills, and environmental regulations, we fall within the allowable metrics to justify it as a completed cleanup.
And to clarify, it was an Acorn truck that had the problem. And
Correct.
And they're responsible for the financial obligation to take care of all this. So it's city property, but the city's not spending anything to take care of this. Is that
Correct.
Any questions from the commission? Not seeing any. Oh, go ahead, please.
I just, we can get into the discussion, the whole process. Maybe I'll just start now. So how is this work authorized? What gave you authorization to start doing the work in the first place?
I can comment on that one if that's all right.
Sure.
This falls under the DERA, which is the Dedicated Emergency Response Authority, being that it's an environmental hazard. And so we work under that authorization at that time to be able to begin work, minimize the impact of the hazardous materials going down further downstream, impacting, more soil, things like that. So since it falls under an emergency, that's what authorized us to get started on this.
Scott, while you're on that, do you think you could just hit on the process you went through with the Army Corps of Engineers as well?
Sure. Army Corps of Engineers a lot of this falls under them, so we did submit reports into them, and then they did give us a permit to work underneath their authority. I believe it's about a 230-page permit that they did give back to us, authorizing us to work, and with all the plans that Andrew had put together, everything was accepted by the Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the Army Corps of Engineers issued a nationwide permit -38, and that permit falls within the category of hazardous material and petroleum spill cleanup. So it's a specific Army Corps of Engineers permit that states and applies exactly to this type of work. Ultimately, we still have to follow Section 404 requirements, which is the Clean Water Act. So that's why we generated stormwater management, or erosion control plans. And when construction was underway, they had erosion control installed on site to make sure that we still complied with that Clean Water Act Section 404 permit requirements as well.
Thanks, that was helpful.
I assume that the work began almost immediately after the spill.
Yes, and that's kind of why we're in this non-traditional type of sequence of doing this, because immediately once the spill happened, coordination with Teller County Emergency Response and Environmental was started through EnviroServe and the soil testing firm at the time. So under their guidance and ultimately through Army Corps of Engineers, and then through this process, they started work immediately to try and mitigate the transfer of those diesel range organics downstream. And ultimately, this location that we're discussing for the flood hazard permit was treated as a containment section. A containment berm was established, and then like noted in the report, all of the hydrophobic absorption mats and everything like that were installed in this location, kind of as a last point, final stand to contain the diesel.
No other questions this time, so, well, thank you, and we'll go to the public hearing section. Don't see anybody in the audience who might want to make comment. Is there anybody online that, with their hands raised, who'd like to ask questions or make comments?
No
I think a
one-
negative response. Guess we'll close the public hearing session. Opportunity to rebuttal, but there were no comments, so I'm assuming not much to say. Any questions for staff at this point? Any discussion?
I'd just like to make a note that with a flood hazard development permit, planning commission, sure if this is correct, is the approval, the final approval. We don't make a recommendation, we actually review it and say, that's okay. Or
That's correct.
one of the very few things.
We got some authority.
Don't take it lightly.
No discussion, comments?
I mean, so the authorization for the work was beyond our scope, so it is what it is, at least as far as we're concerned. I would just curious if we could have done something to be a little closer to the action, you know, maybe versus over nearly a year and a half later.
Karen?
Well, what I will offer is I do remember the day that the incident happened, and it was surprisingly fast between when the truck overturned to when they were seeing the diesel at this site. It was very, very short time frame. So the fact that there was such a swift emergency response, that this was able to be contained, you know, at first place where it really daylit, you know, after having gone underground, I think was a testament to Teller County's emergency response to get in there and get that contained. Because as you know, we're the headwaters of Fountain Creek. So this goes nowhere but downhill from here. So the fact that this is where it's contained and not even further down that open channel there along behind Safeway is pretty much a testament to technology and a fast response. Now, from the standpoint of getting that initial containment done, to when this ideally would have been in front of you, yes, that timeline probably should have been considerably shorter. So it's unfortunate that it was not shorter, but the good news is we're here now to get this taken care of. And that's, you know, staff is comfortable with the ongoing monitoring work and the little bit of restoration that still needs to be on that site. But at a point, should things or conditions change where they determine, or if it's determined that additional excavation work is needed, I would say that probably does need to come back in front of you. And that's currently how that condition of approval is written, is they would need to come back and say, hey, we've got this additional scope of work. This is what it's going to look like. And hopefully from their monitoring and stuff, they'd be able to provide a good description of the area to be excavated and addressed. So that's where we are tonight, is to get things taken care of. Hopefully this truly resolves things.
Yeah, because I mean, if there had been a problem with, for example, the erosion control plan or something like that. Now it's too late, but you know, it had a bit more time with it. That process could have added value to the decision.
Well, and the good news from a staff perspective is the fact that they were getting the Army Corps of Engineer permits, that if they were ignoring that also, then I'd be probably giving you a very different kind of answer or perspective. So at least they took care of the Army Corps of Engineers, and it's at the local level, we need to just finish putting things together here.
So I have a question for staff. What's the normal period of performance for a flood hazard zone permit? Is it set by the estimate of the applicant's time to do the work? Is it a year? What's the normal period of performance? And what are we setting the period of performance for on this flood hazard permit?
I am not sure if that's specified separately in our city code. If it's not, I would say it falls under the same category as any of our other zoning development permits. So they tend to go on for quite a while, so long as work is active. At a certain point when the project is quote unquote done, then we can close out that permit. We've got somebody out there in town right now that's got like a 5-year garage construction project going right now. But you know, they continue to slowly work on it, versus some projects are much quicker. And it looks like the applicant is potentially able to give you a better timeline, Ken, in terms of what they need for this project.
Well, not specifically to that, but I just wanted to note that our nationwide permit from the Army Corps of Engineers does go through. There's a date within 2026 in which that permit expires. So if for any reason, just for council's knowledge, work extended to that, or if your permit didn't align with that expiration date, ultimately the process with the Army Corps is that we request an extension to that same permit. It's not a resubmittal process, but it's an extension. But that information was shared as part of our application process, and I'd be happy to share that same copy of permit with council or the senior planner if so desired, or if it would help conversation.
So right now, this permit applies to the job and how it's described in the permit application, not a time period. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes.
And there is some, I guess it's no longer any more remediation work. It's just some finish work, I guess you might call it, that's left. Is that is that correct?
That's correct. That's based on coordination with GEI and just verification on work that remains to be completed in this southern area.
So there's no planned future work that wouldn't be covered under this permit that would require another one related to this particular incident.
Not that we're aware of at this time, is my understanding, Ken.
Okay.
So when they're done, they'll complete the second part of the form, close it out and then that'll just go through staff review, or will that come back to us?
It has not come back to planning commission.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, the contractor, Scott Kaler has got his hand raised, that it sounds like he's got something he could add.
Very good, Mr. Kaler. What can you add to us? Discussion.
Just wanted to add on to what Andrew was saying in that area, as far as any more remediation, we don't see anything happening there because we did take multiple samples, which is GEI, the consultant that's handling that portion of it. And all the samples did come back, the soil samples, the water samples, everything came back below residential cleanup standards for CDPHE. So I don't see any reason why we'd have to go back there regarding this event whatsoever, except to put things back the way they were when we started, but no excavation or disturbing of it.
Do you have a timeline for completion of the current scope of work?
If we can get this permit and the weather cooperates, I would say within no more than 45 days. Yeah, I would realistically less than 30 days if the weather cooperates.
Understood. Thank you.
Is there any vegetation that has to be reestablished so that erosion won't take place? Or is it all hard landscaping?
There's a very little bit on the banks of the channel there that we'd have to do, but it's very, very minimal. Most of it's going to be the riprap and soil that we'll be placing back in there.
Any other questions or comments? If not seeing none, I guess we're looking for a motion. Lee's not.
Have a public hearing section, or was there nobody there for the public?
There's nobody in the audience tonight and nobody online except for participants.
Okay, thank you.
I move to approve the subject flood hazard development permit.
Well, second.
Who seconded? Jared, thank you.
Just a clarification point, that includes the recommendations from staff, the conditions.
One condition.
One condition to permit any future work.
Yes, with the condition, yes.
Thank you. Any comments, discussion? I guess we can look for a vote.
Commissioner Newcomb,
Yes.
Ken Kennedy,
Yes.
Larry Larson,
Yes.
Don Hoyne,
Yes.
Don DeZello,
Yes.
and Chair Hartsfield.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. That concludes our public hearings for tonight. We had a work session scheduled, but that's been, I guess, canceled, postponed.
Postponed.
Taking us to reports. Staff have any reports to share with us tonight?
Just thank you for your continued work on the code update. I started listening to the meeting I missed. So that I'm fully up to speed with where you've been. And then we do continue to make progress, and wanted to, like this last time, give you a nice chunk of the document to look at. We're on the home stretch. Doesn't feel like it, but I swear we are. So we do expect that will be our focus of our next meeting on January 9th will be a work session related to the code again. And then the other one I wanted to talk about briefly is, I don't know how closely you guys follow legislation and stuff, but one of the things that's out there is this concept of healing centers around using dosing of cyclopin therapy, I think is the correct terminology there.
Medical mushrooms, basically.
Yes, medical mushrooms. And so city council has yet to provide any direction because we are home rule. They have a variety of options as to whether or not they potentially want regulations to regulate these or to just flat out prohibit them in Woodland Park. So at some point, I expect we'll get some direction from city council in terms of what they would like to do around that. So that may be coming up in the future. So just, that's what I know about that. You'll likely see them do a work session at some point here in the future around that particular topic as they weigh what they want to do around that. So that's what I know about that. And then I guess the last thing to note is since our next meeting date would be December 26th. Traditionally, you guys have been very comfortable not meeting that day. So staff has been under the assumption that we would not have a meeting that evening. So I apologize if we stepped out in front of y'all, but nobody's looking at me demanding that you have a meeting, so I think we're good.
Chair's comfortable not meeting on the 26th.
Hey, Karen,
Yes, sir.
since you bring that up, what will be my status for the next meeting, which would be in January? Is there an opportunity to get reinstated before that meeting, or?
Yes, my understanding from the city clerk is she's wanting to put all the reappointments on the January 2nd city council agenda. So if you have not heard from her, I expect you will. So that city council meeting would be at 6:30 on January 2nd, Ken.
All right, and am I allowed to participate in that meeting to be reappointed if they just choose to reappoint me remotely, or do I need to be in person?
I don't know. We can run that past Suzanne and get you an answer on that.
Okay, I appreciate it. I haven't booked that flight yet, but I was planning to travel on the 2nd back to the job site. And I don't necessarily maybe have to, but I just need to know.
Okay, I'll see what I can do to get an answer quickly for you.
All right, I appreciate that.
Yep. So that's all I had this evening.
Commissioners have anything to add to the? Well, since our last meeting of the year, hope you all have a good holiday. And if there's no objections, meeting's adjourned, 7:01.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ken. We'll talk to you guys later.